A black doctor saves the life of a white racist woman, but when she wakes up in the hospital, her reaction is one of fury. How can a life be saved, yet hatred remain intact? This is the question that looms in the minds of everyone when Dr. Michael Evans, a 35-year-old African-American surgeon, finds himself facing an ethical and emotional dilemma after saving the life of Sarah Mitchell, a wealthy white racist woman. The story begins in an environment where racial and social tensions intertwine, revealing the complexity of human feelings. From a young age, Michael faced immense challenges in Detroit, growing up in a poor neighborhood and dealing with the brutality of racism after losing his father in an incident of police violence. These experiences shaped his desire to become a doctor and save lives, but they also left deep scars. He carries the weight of distrust in his relationships, always vigilant, always. As he enters Houston General Hospital, a healthcare center that reflects the social and racial inequalities of the region, Michael prepares for another day of work, unaware that an unexpected event would change everything. When Sarah, an influential luxury store owner and advocate of racial conservatism, is admitted after a severe heart attack, their fates collide dramatically. Rachel, her activist daughter, entrusts her mother's surgery to Michael, aware of the potential conflict this may engender. For Rachel, this is an opportunity for change, but the distrust regarding her mother's reaction to a black surgeon hangs in the air. Michael, for his part, faces the pressure of saving the life of someone who represents everything he abhors. During the surgery, he dedicates himself with impeccable precision, but in his heart, an internal battle unfolds between the desire to save a life and the recognition that this life belongs to someone who has shown so much disdain for people like him. After the successful surgery, when Sarah wakes up, the tension becomes palpable. What should be a moment of gratitude transforms into hostility. Sarah's refusal to accept her vulnerability and her racist reaction shake not only Michael but the entire family dynamic. The shock of the situation leaves Rachel caught between the hope that her mother may change and the reality that prejudice is a difficult barrier to overcome. As the days pass, Rachel's struggle to help her mother confront her beliefs intensifies, leading to a moral dilemma. Should she try to change Sarah, or accept that some scars are too deep to heal? Meanwhile, Michael, emotionally distancing himself, reflects on his own life and the challenges he has faced. He wonders if compassion can truly overcome hatred, even when it comes to saving a life. The story of Michael, Sarah, and Rachel unfolds in a setting filled with emotions, questions, and the complexity of being human, showing that, as much as a life is saved, the true challenge may lie in changing hearts and minds. Sarah's transformation, or lack thereof, will be the ultimate test for everyone involved, and the big question remains: what will happen when prejudice collides head-on with compassion? Michael observed the recovery room with a mix of relief and unease. Sarah was alive, but the expression on her face, still marked by pain and confusion, was anything but grateful. As he distanced himself from the bedside, his thoughts were a storm. What had he done? He had saved the life of a woman who, in his understanding, not only despised his existence but also that of many like him. The room was filled with light, but the shadow of prejudice seemed more intense than ever. Rachel entered the room shortly after, her gaze focused on her mother, but also perceiving the palpable tension between Michael and Sarah. She knew that her mother's recovery was not just about physical issues, but also about deep emotional work. Rachel had always been the black sheep of the family, an activist who challenged her mother's beliefs, but now the need for unity amid conflict was more important than ever. She approached Michael, trying to decipher what he was thinking. "How is she?" Rachel asked, her tone mixing concern and hope. Michael looked at her, noting the strength emanating from her, a strength he wished he had. It was as if she were carrying the weight of 2 generations, trying to bring forth a change that felt so distant. "She's stable, but—" Michael hesitated, searching for the right words. "I don't know if she's willing to confront what really happened here." Rachel shook her head. "She needs to understand that her life is not just about what happened to her. It's about the lives she has disregarded. But where do we start?" Michael wasn't sure. He was so immersed in his own conflict that he could barely see a way forward. He remembered his childhood, the conversations he had with his mother about the importance of forgiving, even when hatred seemed easier. But how could he forgive? As the days passed, the challenges only grew. Sarah, in her recovery, became increasingly reactive. Each interaction with Michael was marked by veiled contempt. She couldn't handle the idea of depending on a black surgeon. "Why didn't you call one of your own?" she shot at him once as she tried to get up from the bed. Michael felt the pain of that statement like a stab. He knew that prejudice was not just a thought, it was a barrier she had built over the years. The tension between mother and daughter also grew. Rachel tried to mediate, but each conversation seemed to turn into an argument. "You don't understand, Mom. You need to see that this isn't about you. It's about all the people you've hurt with your words and actions," she pleaded on a tense night when the atmosphere in the house was charged. Sarah, in response, shot back, "I'm not racist. I just have different opinions. You can't just change how I feel." This statement made Rachel's heart race. She was struggling against years of ingrained prejudice, and the frustration of not being able to break through that barrier was palpable. Meanwhile, Michael was isolating himself more and more. He was wondering if it was worth fighting for someone who seemed so stubborn in holding on to her beliefs. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. He decided to seek solace in his longtime friend, Daniel, a nurse who had also grown up in Detroit. Daniel had always been an anchor in his life, someone who understood the daily struggles and the internal fight that Michael was facing. "You can't let her hatred consume you," Daniel advised in a conversation that stretched into the early hours. "Life is more complex than that. Sometimes you need to see beyond what's on the surface." These words echoed in Michael's mind. He knew he needed to confront Sarah, not just as her doctor, but as a human being who also had his own scars. But the idea of confronting a woman who represented so much of what he despised made him anxious. He wondered if he was prepared for it. At the same time, the desire to try to change the situation pushed him forward. It was a delicate dance between hope and despair. Every day, Michael found himself more embroiled in a conflict that was not only about saving lives, but about what that meant in the broader context of society. He was about to discover that the real battle was not just about saving Sarah, but also about saving himself from the prison of hatred he carried. And so the paths of everyone involved intertwined, leading them to a breaking point where forgiveness and understanding would be tested in ways they had never imagined. Michael felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Each day spent in the recovery room, where Sarah fought against her pain, seemed to drag on, as if time were trapped in a cycle of tension and misunderstandings. He remembered Daniel's words, but they were easier said than done. When he looked at Sarah, he saw not just a patient, but also a representation of many of the prejudices he had faced throughout his life. With every cutting word she uttered, it felt like a piece of his soul was being ripped away. One day, while Michael was reviewing Sarah's chart, she stared at him with defiant eyes. "You're not better than me, you know? You may have a degree, but that doesn't change who you are." The ferocity of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He tried to maintain his composure, but anger and pain mingled in his chest. How could he save someone who saw him only as a stereotype, not as a human being? Meanwhile, Rachel was facing her own demons. With each conversation with her mother, frustration mounted. Sarah seemed trapped in her beliefs, unable to see beyond what she had always known. "Mom, this isn't just about you. It's about the people you've hurt with your words and actions. You need to open your eyes," she exclaimed one night, her voice choked with emotion. But Sarah just responded with a cold, distant look, reinforcing the chasm that was forming between them. Michael began to question whether he was really doing the right thing. He found himself torn between professional responsibility and the need to protect himself emotionally. With each interaction with Sarah, he faced his own insecurities. "What if I fail? What if everything I do isn't enough?" he thought, anguished. The weight of doubt consumed him, and he wondered if he was still capable of facing the battle unfolding before him. On one particularly tense night, Sarah had a setback. The monitor next to her bed began to beep, and the nursing staff rushed to stabilize her. Michael was there watching everything unfold, and helplessness washed over him. He wanted to help, but he felt that the barrier between them was insurmountable. When he finally managed to approach her, Sarah looked at him with a mix of fear and anger. "You can't save me, Michael," she said, her voice weak. Those words hit him like a cruel truth. He realized that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't force her to accept help or to free herself from her prejudices. Rachel, for her part, began to seek support outside the family. She got involved in support groups discussing issues of prejudice and acceptance. In this new space, she found people who shared their experiences and pain. These conversations became a foundation for Rachel, who began to see that she needed to be a voice not only for her mother, but also for those who had never had the chance to defend themselves. Meanwhile, Michael's friendship with Daniel began to fray. Daniel was frustrated with the way Michael was handling the situation. "You're losing yourself in this fight, man. We can't let someone's hatred define us," Daniel said in one of the increasingly tense conversations. Michael felt that Daniel didn't understand the depth of his pain. The pressure to be a hero was crushing him, and he didn't know how to break free. Each passing day felt like a constant battle between hope and despair. Michael began to hesitate in visiting Sarah, feeling that each encounter only deepened the wound. He wondered if he should just step back and let her face her own consequences, but at the same time, the idea of abandoning someone in pain tormented him. He still believed there was a chance for change, but the path was becoming increasingly murky. Before we continue with this exciting story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. And let us know in the comments which city you're watching this video from. The tension between mother and daughter continued to grow, and Rachel realized she needed a plan. She decided that instead of confronting her mother directly, she would try to create a space for understanding, where they could discuss their differences without the weight of the past. It was a risk, but Rachel was willing to try. Meanwhile, Michael found himself at a crossroads. He needed to find a way to confront Sarah, not just as her doctor, but as someone who also carried his own scars. The idea of exposing himself terrified him, but he began to understand that this was the only way to move forward, not just for Sarah, but for himself. The life lessons he had learned over the years were about to be put to the test. He knew the path would be difficult, but the hope for change still pulsed in his heart, even if overshadowed by the pain of the present. The next morning, as the sunlight softly illuminated the recovery room, Michael prepared for another day. He still felt the anguish of Sarah's words echoing in his mind, but a growing determination began to take hold of him. He wanted to get closer to her, not as a distant doctor, but as someone who also carried his own struggles. However, when he entered the room, he found Sarah in a state of agitation. She was thrashing on the bed, suffocated by an anxiety attack. The monitor beeped frantically, and the nursing staff were trying to calm her. Michael immediately realized that something needed to be done, not just to help Sarah, but also to confront his own fears. Michael approached her slowly and said, "Sarah, I'm here." She paused for a moment, her panic-filled eyes locking onto him. "You don't have to go through this alone. Let's breathe together." At first, she hesitated, but the sincerity in his voice seemed to reach something within her. Michael guided her through deep breaths, and gradually the tension in her body began to ease. When the crisis finally passed and silence settled, he sat down beside her. "Do you remember the last time we talked? I know things are difficult between us, but I want to try to understand what you're going through." Sarah, still panting, looked at him with a confused expression. "Why do you care? You're just a doctor. You don't know anything about me." "Things aren't that simple, Sarah," he replied, feeling that this was the moment to open up. "I grew up facing many challenges. I also know the pain of prejudice and judgment. Sometimes I feel invisible, as if people don't see who I really am. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you." Michael's words seemed to touch a sensitive chord within her. He saw Sarah's expression shift, if only for a brief moment. It was as if she were wondering if she could trust him, but before he could deepen the conversation, one of the nurses entered with a new treatment. The interruption brought back the harsh, cold reality surrounding them. When the team left, Michael decided he needed to be more direct. "Sarah, I want to help you, but you need to let me in. I may not be able to save you, but together, we can find a way." She looked at him, the challenge in her eyes replaced by a vulnerability he had never seen before. "What if I don't want to be saved?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if I prefer to stay trapped in my pain?" Michael felt a sharp pain in his heart. The truth was, he didn't have an answer to that question. He had also felt trapped in his own pain, struggling to break free from his fears and insecurities. "Sometimes, pain is all we know," he said softly. "But we can choose to try to change that. We can choose to seek something better." The conversation continued, and as the hours passed, an unexpected connection began to form between them. Michael realized that by opening his heart, he was not only helping Sarah, but also starting to heal himself. This revelation was like a light shining in the darkness that surrounded him. However, as Michael found himself getting closer to Sarah, the tension with Daniel increased. Daniel had mentioned a new project at the hospital that required the doctor's full focus, and Michael found him. He wanted to be there for Sarah, But he also knew that his career was at stake. The weight of responsibility was crushing him. How could he choose between his duty and his compassion? The situation reached a critical point when Daniel confronted Michael during a break at work. "You're putting everything at risk for a patient. You need to remember what really matters. You're here to save lives, not to get lost in emotional issues," he said, frustration evident in his voice. Michael felt his heart race. He realized that in a way Daniel was right, but there was something deeper at stake. He knew he couldn't simply ignore Sarah's pain, nor his own. The battle between his profession and his humanity was intensifying, and he needed to choose a side. After that conversation, Michael decided he needed some time to reflect. He left the hospital and walked through a nearby park. The leaves on the trees were changing color, symbolizing the transition he was experiencing. He realized that by facing his own flaws and fears, he was allowing himself to grow. And perhaps this journey was not just about Sarah, but about himself too. In this moment of clarity, Michael understood that true healing was not just physical. It was emotional and relational. He needed to open up not only to Sarah but also to those around him, including Daniel. He realized that vulnerability could be the key to a deeper transformation, both for himself and for Sarah. When he returned to the hospital, he was determined to face his fears head-on. He remembered that every choice he made, every step he took, could not only impact his life but also Sarah's and many others. With that, a new chapter of his journey was about to begin. Michael returned to the hospital with a renewed determination. He knew that the conversation he had with Sarah had changed something within him. The connection they were beginning to form was fragile but real, and he was willing to nurture it. As he entered Sarah's room, he felt a mix of anxiety and hope. He wanted to be a support, but he knew that would require more from him than just words. When he arrived, Sarah was sitting on the bed, gazing out the window. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. She turned to him, and a shadow of doubt crossed her face. "You're back," she said, her voice still a bit hesitant. "Yes, I'm here," Michael replied, sitting in the chair beside her. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, I guess. But I'm still scared," Sarah admitted, vulnerability cutting through Michael like a knife. He realized that even with her improvement, her internal battle was far from over. "It's normal to feel scared. We all have our own demons to face," he said, trying to be encouraging. "But I'm here to support you. You don't have to go through this alone." She looked into his eyes, and for a moment, she seemed to believe his words. But soon, her expression changed, as if a new wave of anxiety was forming. "What if you can't help me? What if I stay trapped in this pain?" Michael felt his heart tighten. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew he couldn't give up. "Sarah, I can't promise it will be easy, but we can try together. One step at a time." His words echoed in Sarah's mind. Although she wanted to shut herself off, there was a spark of hope beginning to shine. Michael's presence gave her a sense of security that she hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, the pressure on Michael was mounting. Daniel had made it clear that the medical team needed to focus on a new treatment protocol that could be crucial for the hospital. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. How could he split himself between the need to be there for Sarah and the duty of his job? The following days became a constant struggle. Michael found himself running back and forth, managing the demands of the hospital while trying to find time for Sarah. He tried to balance his professional and personal life, but the tension was palpable. Every time he entered Sarah's room, he felt like part of him was missing, as if he were always racing against time. One night, after a particularly difficult day, Michael decided he needed to relax a bit. He met some colleagues at a nearby cafe. Daniel was there, and the conversation quickly turned to the new project. "You can't keep getting emotionally involved with patients, Michael," Daniel said, a tone of concern in his voice. "That can be detrimental to you. You need to stay focused on what really matters." Michael took a deep breath. He was tired of hearing that. "Daniel, I understand your concern, but I can't just ignore what Sarah is going through. This connection is important, and I can't set aside the human side of medicine." The tension between them grew, but Michael refused to back down. He knew he had to fight for what he believed in. Even if it meant challenging Daniel's perspective, he felt that deep down, he was fighting for himself. Returning to the hospital, his heart was heavy. He found Sarah sitting on her bed, staring at the ceiling. "Hi," she said, a bit downcast. "You look tired," he said. "Yeah, it's been a long day," he admitted, sitting down beside her. "But I'm here and I want to know how you're feeling." Sarah hesitated before responding. "I'm trying, but sometimes it's hard. Do you really think we can get through this?" Michael looked into her eyes, seeking the sincerity he always wanted to convey. "Yes, I believe we can. But we need to put in the effort. You can count on me, and together we'll figure out a way forward." The conversation flowed, and even though her battle was far from over, Michael saw a subtle change in Sarah's gaze. She was beginning to trust him, and that gave him hope. But at the same time, the pressure from his work and Daniel's words echoed in his mind. He knew he was at a turning point, where the choices he made would shape not only his future but also Sarah's. As he reflected on all this, Michael realized that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. He needed to be true to himself and to those around him. The transformation he was experiencing wasn't just about Sarah, but about finding his own path amid the chaos. With this in mind, he decided he wouldn't give up, neither on himself nor on Sarah. And so, their journey, marked by challenges and discoveries, was just beginning. Michael walked through the hospital corridors, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. There were days when the pressure felt unbearable, as if the walls were closing in around him. He remembered how he had lost himself amid the demands of work, leaving little space for his emotions. However, Sarah's presence had changed that. Since she entered his life, he began to see the world differently. The conversation they had that morning echoed in his mind. Sarah had exposed her vulnerability, and he knew that wasn't easy. He felt inspired by her courage, but he also had his own internal battles to face. The struggle against the need to be perfect, to have all the answers. He realized he didn't have to carry this burden alone. As the days went by, Michael began to open up more to himself. The friendship that was forming with Sarah was not just support for her, but also an opportunity for him to grow. He realized he could accept help, that he didn't have to be a superhero all the time. This new perspective brought unexpected relief. He started to trust his decisions more and his ability to deal with the challenges that arose. There were moments when insecurity still overwhelmed him. On some nights, he found himself awake, thinking about everything that could go wrong. The pressure from his job and the expectations Daniel placed on him were immense. Michael remembered his colleague's words, "Don't get emotionally involved." But he knew deep down that this connection with Sarah was what made him stronger. It was what gave him a greater purpose. One night, while talking with Sarah, she mentioned how she felt lost in her own mind. He listened attentively, feeling a deep empathy. By sharing his own fears, Michael realized he was helping not only her but himself as well. Talking about his insecurities eased the pressure in his chest. He realized that everyone faces battles, and there is no shame in admitting it. With each conversation, their friendship grew stronger. Michael saw how Sarah's vulnerability was a strength. She allowed herself to feel pain, and by doing so, she began to find ways to overcome it. Michael learned that true wealth was not the position he held in the hospital, but the human connection he established with those around him. He began to appreciate the little things, a smile, a word of encouragement, the presence of someone who cared. Meanwhile, the medical team advanced with the new treatment protocol. Michael found himself torn between his work and his commitment to Sarah. In a moment of reflection, he realized that his life was not just about being successful at the hospital, but also about being a worthy and present human being. This revelation helped him find a new balance. He decided that he could do both, be a good doctor and a loyal friend. There were days when things didn't go as planned. Michael struggled to find time for Sarah or felt overwhelmed by his responsibilities. But instead of giving up, he used these failures as learning opportunities. He began to see these moments as stepping stones in his journey, not as insurmountable obstacles. Each new beginning made him stronger and more determined to move forward. One morning, while watching Sarah in a therapy session, he noticed how much more confident she was. Her smile was more genuine, and he felt immense pride for her. Michael realized that just as Sarah was transforming, he was also changing. Their journey was intertwined, and that was one of the greatest lessons he had learned. Over time, Michael became an advocate for empathy in the hospital. He started talking with other colleagues about the importance of connecting with patients, of seeing beyond diagnoses and treatments. This shift in perspective not only helped Sarah, but also impacted how he viewed his work. He learned that success was not just about achieving goals or gaining recognition, but about making a difference in people. As the friendship between Michael and Sarah deepened, they both found strength in each other. Sarah became a reflection of the courage Michael sought within himself, and he, in turn, was the anchor that helped her navigate her internal storms. Together, they discovered that sometimes true overcoming comes from facing adversities hand in hand, learning from each other, and growing together. And so their journey, marked by challenges and transformations, continued to unfold before them, full of PR. The tension hung in the air as Michael prepared for the most important meeting of his career. The hospital was about to implement a new treatment protocol that could change the lives of many patients, and he was one of the key people responsible for its execution. However, the pressure was palpable, and his mind was filled with doubts. He remembered Daniel's words, his skeptical colleague, who often reminded him not to get emotionally involved. But now Michael knew that this connection was what made him stronger. That morning, Sarah had been hospitalized again. Her fight against the disease was intensifying, and even with all his personal growth, Michael felt powerless. He couldn't let fear and insecurity overwhelm him at this crucial moment. Their friendship had strengthened, and he knew he needed to find a balance between his professional responsibility and his personal commitment to her. The meeting began, and the members of the medical team were ready to discuss the new protocol. Michael took the floor, and as he presented his ideas, he felt nervous. He looked at the faces of his colleagues and, for a brief moment, wondered if they truly believed in his vision. But remembering Sarah and how she had become a source of inspiration in his life, he found courage. "We need to look beyond the numbers and diagnoses," he said, his voice steady. "We must remember that each patient is a human being with their own battles. Empathy is not just a pretty word, it is the essence of what we do." The reactions were mixed. Some colleagues nodded, while others appeared skeptical. Daniel made a disdainful face and questioned whether empathy would really bring results. But Michael remained unfazed. He knew that change was necessary, not just for the hospital, but for himself. He recalled all the conversations he had with Sarah, where she taught him to value feelings and vulnerability. By the end of the meeting, a tense atmosphere lingered. Michael felt as if he had fought against a giant and emerged victorious, yet the sense that an even greater challenge awaited him hung in the air. After a few hours, he received a phone call that would change everything. Sarah was in critical condition and urgently needed intervention. His heart raced, and the reality of his profession hit him hard. He rushed to her room, and upon entering, he saw Sarah surrounded by doctors and nurses. Her face was pale, but when their eyes met, he felt a wave of hope. This was the moment when everything he had learned became crucial. He knew he had to be strong, not just as a doctor, but also as a friend. Michael told Sarah that he was there with her, and that they would get through this together, holding her hand. The connection they shared intensified in that moment. He realized that his fears and insecurities no longer mattered. What truly mattered was his presence by her side. As the medical team worked quickly, Michael decided he wouldn't remain on the sidelines. He became an active part of the team, asking questions, offering ideas, and most importantly, ensuring that Sarah received the best possible care. He remembered their discussions about the strength that comes from vulnerability. This was the time to put everything into practice. After a long and agonizing wait, the surgery was a success. Sarah was recovering, and Michael felt a heavy part of his heart had been lifted. He realized that this experience was not just about Sarah's battle, but also about his own overcoming. He had faced his fears and insecurities, and the pressure he felt before the meeting finally dissipated. In those difficult moments, he understood that true success does not come from achieving goals or recognition, but from being present for those we love and making a difference in their lives. When Sarah finally woke up and smiled at him, Michael knew he had found his path. Their friendship not only survived, but transformed into something even stronger. Reflecting on everything he had experienced, Michael understood that life is made up of ups and downs, and that every failure is an opportunity for a fresh start. He had learned the importance of empathy, human connection, and the strength that comes from opening up to others. He knew that together they could face any challenge life threw at them. And so their journey continued, filled with promises and hopes, showing that true wealth lies in the relationships we build along the way. Sarah's recovery was slow but steady. Michael, always by her side, became a pillar of support in the weeks following the surgery. He visited her room every day, bringing flowers and books, chatting about everything and nothing. His presence seemed to make Sarah feel stronger, and at the same time served as a constant reminder to Michael that his choices had a real impact on someone else's life. One afternoon, as sunlight filled the hospital room, Sarah turned to Michael and said that she didn't know what she would do without him, calling him her guardian angel. He smiled, but a feeling of discomfort washed over him. He didn't see himself as a hero. He was just fulfilling his role. He replied that she was stronger than she realized, and that he was just there to remind her of that. The truth was that, in that moment, he was also reminding himself of his own strength. Weeks passed, and Sarah began to be discharged. Michael was eager to see her at home, but he also feared what would come next. He knew her battle was far from over. Once Sarah returned home, Michael became her support, helping her with daily tasks and accompanying her to medical appointments. He noticed that their relationship had changed. Now there was a deeper bond built on trust and vulnerability. One day, while sitting in the garden, Sarah looked at Michael and said that he had really changed the way she viewed life, and that his empathy had given her strength. Michael felt a warmth in his chest. He had learned from her the value of being present, and he now understood that this exchange was what made life meaningful. He replied that he had learned a lot from her too, and that every moment, every struggle, teaches something valuable. However, the pressure at work still weighed heavily on his shoulders. Michael needed to implement the new treatment protocol at the hospital, something he had discussed with the team during the tense meeting. He couldn't shake the feeling that, although he had won the personal battle alongside Sarah, the war within the institution was still ongoing. He decided that he couldn't let the skeptical voices demotivate him. It was time to take action. With Sarah's support and the experiences they had shared, Michael returned to the hospital with renewed determination. He sat down with his team, reviewing what they had discussed earlier. He emphasized that they needed to do this not just for themselves, but for the patients who trusted their work. They deserved treatment that considered their lives and stories. They would do this together. The team began to unite around the new vision. Michael noticed that his passion and empathy were starting to gain momentum. He encouraged open dialogues, allowing everyone to express their concerns and ideas. Gradually, resistance began to diminish. The colleagues began to understand that empathy did not exclude effectiveness, but complemented it. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her recovery at home. She started to participate in support groups, using her experience to help other patients, just as Michael had done for her. The connection they shared expanded, and they became advocates for a more humane approach to treating illnesses. One quiet night, while discussing their journeys, Sarah said, "I never imagined that all of this would lead us to Esser. You helped me find my voice, and now I'm helping others do the same." Michael felt a wave of pride. They had become agents of change not only in each other's lives, but also in the lives of many. At the hospital, the implementation of the new protocol was a success. Michael saw patients opening up, expressing their emotions and concerns, and the medical team began to recognize the value of a more empathetic treatment. He remembered the tense meeting when he felt small in the face of challenges. Now he knew that true strength lay in connecting, listening, and caring. Michael reflected on everything he had learned. Life was a cycle of struggles and victories, and each step alongside Sarah had led him to a new understanding of what it meant to be a doctor and a friend. He looked to the future with hope, knowing that regardless of the challenges, empathy and human connection would always guide him. Together, they could face any storm that came their way. And so, amidst laughter and tears, their journey continued, filled with promises and the certainty that love and friendship were the greatest forces of all. Michael observed the transformation happening around him, both in his work environment and in Sarah's life. He never imagined that his decision to support his friend during such a difficult time would lead him on a journey of self-discovery and empathy. The strength he found alongside her not only changed how he viewed his role as a doctor, but also made him rethink what it truly meant to help others. That experience taught him that true success wasn't just about doing a good job, but about building meaningful connections. Sarah's life was rising again, and the pain that had once imprisoned her was now transforming into motivation. She had become an activist, using her experience to inspire others to face their battles. The friendship between her and Michael deepened, and together they became an example of overcoming adversity and courage. Michael realized that his journey alongside Sarah wasn't just about curing diseases, it was about healing souls. As the days passed, Michael began to feel more confident in his role at the hospital. He introduced changes that promoted more humane treatment, and his team began to follow his example. What once seemed impossible was now becoming the norm. Patients felt heard and respected, and the medical team united around a common goal: The resistance he initially faced dissipated, giving way to a new spirit of collaboration. Michael was not just changing the protocol, he was changing hearts. However, a shadow from the past still loomed over him. Some people from the hospital administration were dissatisfied with the changes he was promoting. They saw empathy as an obstacle to efficiency, and Michael knew he needed to fight to protect what he had achieved. He decided it was time to confront those who were trying to sabotage his work. With the support of Sarah and his team, he would gather evidence and patient accounts to show that the change truly made a difference. The moment of confrontation arrived. In a meeting with the board, Michael presented data and moving stories that highlighted the importance of the new protocol. He spoke with passion, advocating not only for his vision, but also for the dignity of the patients. The room fell silent, and Michael realized that his determination was resonating. He was not just fighting for a cause, he was defending life and hope. At the end of the meeting, the board decided to support the changes. Michael felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. He had won the battle, not just for himself, but for everyone who depended on humane and compassionate care. The transformation he and Sarah initiated at the hospital spread, impacting the lives of many, and the victory gave him a new perspective on what it meant to be a true leader. Now, reflecting on his journey, Michael realized how each challenge had shaped him. His friendship with Sarah not only inspired him to be a better doctor, but also helped him find his voice and fight for what he believed in. He learned that mutual support could be a powerful force, and that true wealth lies in the connections we make along the way. Success is not just an individual achievement, but a collective effort that transforms lives. In the end, Michael and Sarah became tireless advocates for empathy in medical care, and their legacy would continue to impact future generations. Their story became a reminder that even in the darkest struggles, the light of friendship and solidarity can shine brightly. They learned that when we face storms together, we can overcome any challenge. Now, reflecting on this journey, Michael invites everyone to take action. Share your experiences of overcoming challenges and the importance of mutual support in the comments. May your stories inspire others to find strength in the small connections of everyday life. Together, we can create a more empathetic and welcoming world. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to share stories that touch the heart and transform lives. The time to act is now.